Welcome to the Paranormal Panel. We have all sorts of people here, and we're talking about paranormal things, whether or not they relate to romance. Some of it will be ghost story-like, and some of it will be horror-like, and some of it will be romance-like, and it's just all about all the paranormal creatures ever. So, Anita, would you like to introduce yourself, say where you're from, and what your favorite paranormal creature is?
Okay, I'm Anita Stewart. I write as AF Stewart, and I'm from Nova Scotia, Canada. And it'd be kind of hard for me to have a favorite because I like them all, but I'd probably go with the ghosts if I had to choose. Possibly the Banshee as a second choice. So.
How about you, Barbara?
Like banshees.
Me, I'm Barbara Underwood from Tumut, which is a small country town in New South Wales, Australia. My favourite paranormal character is a tough one. I think also ghosts or invisible spirits, things like that, although I am partial to Dracula, vampires. But even though I haven't been reading much vampires, I like the classic Bela Lugosi vampire character. Was that the question? Did I answer everything? Yes.
I think so. Heidi?
I'm Heidi Angel. I'm from Salt Lake City, Utah, and I have three favorites. I can't pick one. Vampires, werewolves, and immortals in that order.
How about you, Mary?
I really like them all. I'm currently writing stuff with a bunch of shifters, but they're all kinds, and they are also they're like multi paranormal, because my werewolf is also an Incubus, or I guess Eros vampire is what I guess the current thing is. I have just people with magical powers and people that are semi-immortal. I like writing about anything that goes above and beyond what you would normally think a regular human could do. I guess that kind of falls under it. And ghosts. I like ghosts too.
Yeah. I feel like everything paranormal is human plus something.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It is.
So, Shane.
Hey. I'm with Mary on a lot of what she just said, actually. The whole, I don't know that what I write, when I write paranormal characters, I don't know that they fit neatly into one category or another category as much as they are just sort of, there's something about them that exceeds what we would normally see in a human being, right? Like they operate on another level, on another plane. I did note that selfishly my favorite paranormal character type is a succubus, but then in my most recent book there's a character that maybe is a witch, and so like I like playing with that idea, like, and since we don't experience the story from her perspective, the protagonist is always kind of like up in the air on whether or not she actually is one of those, types, or if that's just a label that he wants to put on her to make her easier to understand for himself. But regardless, I'm kind of interested in both of those types. And I'm from North Carolina. I don't know if we're doing that this time, but...
Yeah. I'm in the East San Francisco Bay Area, near Berkeley. Yeah, I like all of the kinds of... I don't know. I like the shifters, but I like the non... I don't know. Everyone goes to the werewolf first. But the shifters that I have tend to be... cats, like not house cats, but like jungle cats.
Like lions.
Yeah, or
Jaguars.
Bears. In this particular instance, the guy I'm thinking of, he gets cursed because his cousin drags him to a part of the town that he's not supposed to end up in, and he wakes up with a curse that has turned him into a Black Panther.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Well, what I'm doing with mine is that since mine's set in ancient Egypt and they all have animal heads, I'm thinking maybe they're actually all shifters. So that's how I'm kind of rolling mine, is that they're all shifters.
That actually makes some sense,
Mhm.
especially with the Egyptian mythology and stuff.
Mm.
I mean,
Well, my
I see Anubis as a werewolf. You know.
Yeah, my books are based. Yes, the last 2 books in my series are also set in ancient Egypt, but I'm not using the mythology as such with the animals and gods. Like Shane was saying, my characters have supernatural abilities, and then there's also the element of black magic and casting spells. So they're normal human beings in my story, but they all have an aspect of supernatural. And then it's a matter of whether they use it for good or evil. So that's where I'm coming from too, with my characters in my books right now.
So, why is it that paranormal is so fascinating to us?
I think we all strive for something more than just this physical world. And for some people it might be just an escape, but others, like me personally, for instance, I'm always looking for something above and beyond the physical, tactile things in this world, and that's why I write that kind of stuff.
I think it comes from childhood, actually. I think, like when we're little children and we're faced with something, we all go, I wish I could fly, or I wish I could disappear, or I wish I could hide under the bed from the monster, or I wish that I could cast a spell. I think we all have these wishes when we are children, and so we learn as we grow up that that's probably not going to happen, but it makes us fascinated still by these stories.
Mm.
I think that paranormal, I mean, it's always been a part of the human collective. We've always had it as a way to explain the unexplainable. And until science came along, it was the only explanation. And I think that science developed because of our need to explain the unexplainable.
Yeah,
And has developed from there.
Yeah, today's modern stories are extension of the mythology of the gods and the creatures and everything that people use to explain things that couldn't be explained.
Yeah.
Modern day superheroes are the same thing as ancient gods.
Yeah, exactly. Comics are our mythology, our modern mythology, really. That's my opinion, anyway.
Oh yeah,
absolutely.
I agree.
I think that, so in my stories, at least in the kinds of reading that I like to do when I read paranormal type stories, I think my fascination comes from putting a regular old person up against something bigger than themselves. And maybe that's a conflict, or maybe that's something else. I mean, I think that paranormal romance is such a big deal because those relationships exist outside of the time and experience that we are accustomed to experiencing. So it's fun, or it's interesting to put a realistic person in a situation that doesn't really exist. I think it gives us an opportunity to see what humanity would do when faced with something that exists outside of the realm of actual possibility.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I just realized something. So when I was little, I was terrified of the snakes that would show up as soon as my mom closed my bedroom door. And at one point, my mom asked me, well, why don't you make friends with them? And so I did, and then I was never scared of the dark ever again. And I think that what we're doing in modern storytelling with romanticizing these paranormal creatures is we're taking something that's scary and we're transforming it into something that's no longer scary anymore. And I just saw that parallelism just right now. Like sometimes you want them to be scary, but as a society, I think we're opening up to facing our fears and transforming them.
Yeah, paranormal is a way of dealing with fears. It's especially, and also with the horror genre,
Yeah.
it's the same thing.
Yeah.
It's a way of taking a fear and making it tangible and making it controllable, almost.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You can feel that fear when you're reading a horror story. You can feel the fear and know that as soon as you're done with the story, that emotion, that you can let go of that emotion.
Mm-hmm.
As opposed to maybe in real life, you can't let go of the emotion because you don't have that kind of control over it. It doesn't have a beginning and an ending that's clearly defined in the same
When I was a
way
little
that
kid,
horror movie does.
when I was a little kid and I was afraid of monsters at night, my parents would sweep them out with a broom that they called magic. They would come in with a magic broom and dustpan, and they would sweep around the edge of the bed and sweep out the closet, and then they would say, "The monsters are gone. We used the magic broom on it," and I would sleep real hard after that. So
Yeah.
I
We
mean,
had to-
that's another paranormal thing too, right?
Yeah, we had to do a similar thing when my son, I think he was fifth birthday, fifth Halloween. First time ever, he was absolutely horrified, terrified, had to come home early, and then he couldn't sleep. He was so scared that the monsters were going to come in and get him. And my mom, who dressed as a witch every year from as far as I can remember, because it's an easy costume, came in with her little magic wand and cast spells to make sure that the monsters couldn't get in and sealed the room, and he was fine after that. Everything was great.
Yeah, I used to be afraid of, I guess, storms. I actually had night terrors over those. And I'm old enough to be actually a living witness of that supposed UFO invasion that occurred over Washington, D.C. in the early 50s. I remember my dad and everybody going out to look for it, and it scared me. And I guess that was probably my first introduction to paranormal, but my mom put up candles all around my room. And I find that storms and candles and fire work its way into almost all of my writing now. But as long as there were candles, I was going to be safe because they couldn't be near the candles. So, I mean, I light candles every morning now,
Yeah. Yeah, no, my mom would read to me to candlelight. So, yeah, I get that.
Mm-hmm.
There's something even with like, I don't know if this is true of everyone, but like the first proper ghost stories I experienced were told to me by my friends when we were on camping trips around a campfire, and that's sort of stereotypical, I guess, but there's a context to being outside around a fire and hearing these stories told verbally.
Mm-hmm.
That goes back to like the dawn of civilization. That's how we told those stories back.
Yeah, I think they call it a racial memory or something like that. Anthropologists call it racial memory.
Paranormal's very cultural too, because I know, like in Nova Scotia, our entire culture here is like embedded with ghost stories. They're everywhere. I think it's part of why I so like ghosts and ghost stories, because I grew up with it. It's like you can't go into a town or a place in Nova Scotia without having some sort of ghost tale attached to it.
Mm-hmm.
Because I mean, we've got ghost ships and ghost ladies and everywhere.
That actually, like the ghost ship thing, I had a question that I wanted to ask the group, and that is, can the paranormal include more than just characters like we were talking about earlier, like, obviously witches, vampires, werewolves, all of that, but what about spaces and terrains and locations? I mean, obviously you have the haunted houses, but what else can have that paranormal quality that's more of a location or a setting?
I think lots of things. There's stories about haunted objects, and like I said, the ghost ship. Like there's one ghost ship that's very famous here. It's in the Northumberland Strait, and several like tourist ships go up, and they swear they see this schooner, tall ship thing sailing and then disappear. So I mean, and then there's another pirate ship down in the South Shore that catches on fire and disappears. And we've got a Viking ship in Newfoundland that supposedly still haunts the coast. So, I mean, ships are very common in ghost stories. And there's haunted dolls. Like, I think there's something in Japan.
Yep.
There's some, and there's other haunted objects I've heard of too.
But are those haunted objects? Are those haunted because they are possessed or inhabited by the spirit of a ghost or something like that, or do they get their paranormal power or quality from something else?
Well, it depends.
They get it from a trauma.
Yeah.
It's not an individual, but a collective group that was traumatized. It's like the Native American burial lands.
Okay.
Yeah, but there's also the cursed object too.
Yeah, that's true.
That like someone has laid a curse on it, or it's because someone died with it or something, and now it's evil. Well, usually when you have
not the person's spirit.
Yeah,
it's the anger and hatred
and
or misery that is a part of what that person was when they died.
Yeah.
Yeah, the spirit can go into an object if it can't release from its life. I think a lot of this too, the paranormal, is a way that I think somebody else touched on this earlier, is a way that we explain what happens when we die. You know, because we don't have anything except faith, mythology, whatever. You know, I think we all look for that, and so you get into paranormal and research or reading or writing because it's a way of explaining it, explaining what you think.
Yeah, there is a lot of unknown and death related to the paranormal too, like the vampire and all those undead paranormal things. They're all related to what we don't know about death.
Or else they're a way of somehow defeating death by returning.
Right.
Yeah, but a lot of those myths started as fear of death, because everybody was afraid that somebody would come back from being dead.
And that was because they often found that people did wake up in their coffins and try to get out. But that was because our science was bad and we were predicting people were dead when they weren't necessarily dead. So, yeah, I had a horrible fear of being buried alive after hearing stories about that, and my mom assured me that that wouldn't happen because they do an autopsy first, and that didn't help me feel better at all.
Don't ever go into the house of mummies in Guanajuato, Mexico. Don't take a child in there. That'll keep you busy for years.
Oh yeah.
Oops. Whoa. You lost Heidi.
Oh, did you lose me?
No.
Are you? No, I'm still here.
No,
we were just having a moment of silence.
I saw your publicity picture suddenly instead of you. I'm going.
Yeah, no, I see that there on the side. I don't know why that's there. That's weird. I didn't put it there. Sorry.
I would rather my publicity picture be there instead of me.
We like being able to see your face when you talk.
Yeah.
So how I don't know what I'm trying to ask.
I have another question if you want to.
Yes, ask your question.
I wonder if we could go around the room and ask, and everyone talk a little bit about whether or not they've read anything paranormal as children, and if maybe that sort of played into it a little bit, and sort of what are the influences that got you into the genre?
No, that's easy for me. Grimm's fairy tales. And
Me
King
too.
Arthur. The King Arthur legends and Grimm's fairy tales. And I mean the original Grimm's fairy tales, not the Disney-fied version.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the dark ones.
Many times we like the dark ones better.
Yeah. Oh, they're a lot of fun. I mean, they're
The Disney
cannibals
ones are
and
enjoyable, but
witches
the
and
dark
cannibals
ones are
and
They're way better.
killing and all sorts of things. They're a lot more fun than the Disney ones.
And the people who are horrible decide their own. My favorite fairy tale, like that's not the Norwegian one, that's a Grimm's fairy tale, is the Goose Girl, because the maid who like usurps her place, she says, you know, if someone did this, then they should have this punishment, and the king's like, well, you did that, so you have to have the punishment that you thought it deserved. And as a kid, I was like, that is how justice should be.
Yeah.
Right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
But those Grimm fairy tales don't have pretty songs in them, you know. Like I like a good sing along.
Well, that's true. The Disney songs are superior to the fairy tales. I'll give you that.
That's yeah.
True,
The Disney
true.
ones are not bad. They're just
Different.
They're not as fun.
They're softballs.
They're kind of like Twilight is to Bram Stoker.
Yeah.
And it's a process that, I mean, we've been doing it for a while, though. You know, the original Grimm fairy tales, they were cautionary tales. They were stories that were told to their children to make them stay in their bed at night instead of go wandering the neighborhood. They were cautionary tales to warn, especially the ones about girls, you're not safe in this world. You need to protect yourself. We forgot that thanks to Disney.
Yeah.
And the vampire tales are the same thing. It's avoid the charismatic, charming stranger. He's going to hurt you. And now that's to Twilight. Do they all, though? No, but, you know, it's one of those better safe than sorry situations back in the 1800s. Nowadays,
but Dracula was rolling around with those, with that trio of, like, you know, of lady vampires. And I was
well, yeah, absolutely.
into the
Men
lady
got the warning,
vampires.
too. Yeah, that's true. But it's the danger.
I did not get the warning. I did not get the warning. I just got the thumbs up.
You just thought it was a good idea? Yeah. You
Yeah,
read
I
the
was like,
wrong
this
stories,
sounds fun.
sir. You read the wrong stories.
I just read it the wrong way.
Oh, is that what it is?
Yeah.
I guess I was late to the party. I was Poe.
Oh, I loved Poe.
Mm.
Loved
Yeah,
Poe.
I think my mom was always worried that I would be warped, so I never got the really good stuff when I was a little kid. I had to wait until I was old enough to read Poe, which was actually pretty early. And
Yeah, I was going to say, I read Poe in like 6th or 7th grade. My mom was a little concerned.
Yeah. Well, my parents never censored my reading habits, so.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, and my
Okay,
mom
pretty
didn't
much
either,
what I
but she was always concerned about what I was choosing to read.
Mhm.
The first Poe I read was Telltale Heart, and I was very young, and it stuck with me in a big way.
Oh, yeah. Every time you run and your heart would be pounding in your chest, you could hear it in your ears, it pop in your head, right?
Oh yeah.
I was totally there with you.
Mm-hmm. Well, I got into Poe because we lived in Charleston, South Carolina, and that is a paranormal city if anybody has ever lived there.
Oh, yeah, I've been there.
Yeah. If you didn't believe in the paranormal, you live there or New Orleans, and you will believe in it. And you will probably experience something. So many of Poe's stories took place in Charleston that we actually went to Goldbug Island when it was still an island instead of a yacht club, and kind of walked around there for a while.
You look like you're about to say something, Barbara.
Yes, I was just thinking my background's quite different from everybody else. I didn't read Poe or Grimm or anything like that, but I was trying to put together what it was that influenced me, and I think it was my mother. It was interesting because my father was very scientific. He was an engineer, and he was always down to earth. But my mother was sort of religious and superstitious, and she'd talk about demons, and she'd watch these horror movies. I remember sitting when I was small, she'd be watching Dark Shadows, and she'd say, oh, I shouldn't be watching this is scary, but she'd be hooked, and I think that influenced me too. And then she'd tell me some of the superstitions or stories about demons and things like that, which scared me in a way, but I think that must have been what got me thinking along those lines. And then when I was a bit older at school, I read, my favourite books were about ghosts. So haunted houses, ghosts, and my mother loved those too. So when there was a haunted house movie on TV, we both had to sit and watch it, and my father would scoff, bah humbug. But I still lean towards what my mother believed. So that's my background. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Did anyone ever read Scary Stories to Read in the Dark?
Yes.
No.
It's a pretty good collection. Now, when I was coming up, so I'm 30, and so when I was a kid, I was coming up at the height of the R.L. Stein Goosebumps.
Yeah, my son
craze.
is. My son's 30, so.
Yeah, and I
that's where I heard that from. That's where I heard that from, Shane, because I was going, that sounds familiar. And, oh, my son. Okay.
Yeah. Goosebumps was like, I was during the summer, I was reading a book a day, and those are really weird stories for kids.
Oh yeah.
So I think that in a lot of ways that's sort of where that starts for me. Like when I was really, really young, and then a little bit older, like I probably started reading Goosebumps in like 3rd grade, and then got into the Poe stuff probably like in middle school.
Yeah. I don't know what the first paranormal book I read was, because I went from not reading at all. Like I was 7.5 before I learned how to read, because I was busy acting out my own stories. I was like, why would I want to read something? Like, my imagination is way more interesting. So I learned to read late, and then it was like a switch. I went from not reading anything, and then in the course of a week, I started reading everything. And I think I read through the library in that first year. And,
I did that too.
There are so many books that I love that I go back to over and over and over again, and I have no idea which one is first.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So now, what do people read now as paranormal influences?
I loved the Vampire Academy series by Rochelle Mead.
Those are good.
It made me forgive people who want to kiss vampires. My series is all about vampires who want to be killed, not kissed, or people who believe that vampires should be killed and not kissed.
I like that idea of vampires that want to be killed, like suicidal vampires is interesting.
That was Anne Rice's job.
Right.
But I grew up with Lost Boys vampires and Anne Rice vampires, and even though there's that mystical quality, it's kind of like the appeal of a lion or a shark. Yes, they're beautiful, they're powerful, they're amazing, but they're still going to eat you. So probably not a good idea to fall in love with them. And so kind of brought that back, and I appreciated the take that Rochelle had in creating different types of vampires. So you still have those evil vampires that we've all wanted to kill, but then there's also good vampires. And creating that extra layer made it easier for me to accept the idea of people wanting to kiss vampires.
Yeah.
Easier. Not totally on board yet, but
I liked about that series as well. But there's also everything that Ilona Andrews has done counts as paranormal, and I really, really enjoy her work. Some of it is technically urban fantasy, I think, but it qualifies as paranormal for sure. There's Were Creatures, and her Were Creatures in the Kate Daniels series are amazing, because each person can only turn into one type of animal, and the animal is like a bigger, stronger version of the natural, like actual animal. But they're organized in the way that animals would organize. So they self-organize into packs. And there's an alpha male and there's an alpha female, and there's like an organization. There's like all of the Were Creatures collectively have one pack, but then within that there's like hierarchy, and it all makes sense if you understand how animals form packs. And then her vampires are mindless and have to be controlled by wizards. So the werewolves are the vampires are like these shriveled creatures that don't even look human anymore. And if they're not being controlled, then they're extremely dangerous and they'll go out and eat everybody. But when they're controlled, they can be used as messengers, they can be used as spies. So that makes it really interesting. There's more, you know. It's not just we have to stab all the vampires. Yeah.
Do you think it's a recent development that paranormal characters have become more relatable? Like at some point, we were talking about how with Grimm that they were used as sort of cautionary tales, and it seems like for much of human history that's been the case. So is it just recently that we've started to say, well, maybe we can make them a little bit more human? And is that, where do you think that comes from?
I don't think it's necessarily a recent thing. I think there are some Grimm's fairy tales where the prince has a curse and so he turns into a bear during the day, and then the story is about how he breaks that curse. And so he's a good character, he just happens to be paranormal. Whereas there are other ones that are cautionary. So I think there's always been a blend.
Okay.
And I think we're noticing the nice characters, the good characters, the friendly characters more now because I think we live in a world that is becoming more and more safe. I mean, there's still a lot of danger out there, but compared to 100 years ago, it's much safer.
Let me try to come at that question a different way then. It seems like there are character types throughout history that have been vilified, right?
Vampires, witches,
right. And so
werewolves.
these are characters that seem to be going through the transformation. Certainly there have been paranormal characters throughout history that have been relatable or even good guys, for lack of a better term. But these other characters have been historically evil and now not so much.
Yeah, I think society is going through a psychological shift. In the past, everything has always been very dichotomous. Either you're good or you're bad.
Right.
Either you're a villain or you're a hero. Either you're weak or you're strong. You can't be both. And I think as psychology has delved into the human psyche more, and research has shown that bad people don't think that they're bad. They think that they're just being misunderstood. And as my generation grew up with psychology being fed to us from, middle school on, pretty much, and being, rather than picking on that kid who's weird, we need to understand where he's coming from and why he's different, and creating that more sympathetic perspective kind of allows us to look at other things that we've always been taught are black and white. And, the whole concept of the devil not being a villain, I think that's a very intriguing, and it makes sense because, he's an angel, so how can he be evil?
He rebelled.
Exactly, but does that make him evil, or is he just misunderstood?
I mean,
maybe
he thought he could make heaven great again.
Exactly. I mean, well, when you read the Apocrypha,
I hear that. I hear that.
That was the whole point. In the Apocrypha, he said that the reason that he would make sure that none of us had freedom of choice was so that we could all go back to heaven. That sounds like a great guy. I mean, his intentions were good. He didn't want to subjugate the race. He wanted to make sure that they all returned to heaven. And when you take it from that perspective, maybe he does not seem like such a bad guy. He's just misunderstood.
Or he just happens to have a different vision of the future than the boss.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing, is that he's not the boss.
Yeah.
And so when, the opening monologue in Braveheart is that the winners write history, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, all of our views of any of those losers is sort of tainted by whoever gets to write the story.
Right.
That's true.
One thing I've noticed is, did I walk on somebody?
No, I was just going to say, as society and our way of thinking becomes more complex, we no longer want or need that black and white, the good and evil. That's what I've been using in books lately, is that the villain or the bad guy in my book has a lot of depth and character, and I reveal as the story progresses what made him rebel, like Satan, for instance, and then there are actually some good ideas why he rebelled and became the so-called bad guy. And I think readers these days do want something a bit more complex, or something they can get their teeth into, not just a stereotyped bad guy versus good guy story. So please go on.
Okay, no, I've noticed too, as the I think as we get more, I guess, educated, widely educated with other cultures, we realize that a non-Western perspective of cultural development is that a duality in nature. In other words, if things are good, they are also evil. Or without evil, there is no good. Without good, there is no evil. And so I know in Native American cultures, as well as many other cultures, you have two different sides of a coin. And I think that's what we're seeing in paranormal characters now. It's if they are bad, it's not why, it's what is their good side. Or if they are good, where's the flaw? Did I get everybody here?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep, that's right.
Yeah, and the paranormal characters also, they're kind of tailor-made for the anti-hero protagonist, like the bad boy hero. Because, I mean, vampires, werewolves, they've all got the dark side, and they can be a protagonist and still have darkness and temptation and all that thing. So they're kind of, if someone wants to make a bad boy hero or an anti-hero, they're kind of tailor-made for it.
Yeah.
Do you think that we've started then to look at the paranormal characters as, instead of looking at them as the villain, do you think that we start to look for ourselves in them? Like, are they now the relatable character?
Could be.
I think I have this philosophy about fantasy in general, where whether it's paranormal of any kind or just completely made up world, I think it's often easier for us to look at a situation and learn from it when we can give ourselves the distance of saying this is a fantasy. It makes it easier to connect to the situation because it's not quite so personal. It's not, you're never going to run into that specific person or that specific creature in real life, but you can. It's almost like you have a magnifying glass, so you can see the entire color of the wing of the dragonfly, right? So you can zoom in on whatever the issue or the problem or the situation is in a way that you can't always in real life. But when you read about it and then you learn from those situations, then you can start to notice and apply what you've learned in real life. Like everything I know about people, I learned from fantasy.
Right. So is it like when you think about, we mentioned earlier the like the superhero, like our fascination with the superhero mythology. What makes superheroes appealing to me is that in a lot of ways they're perfect, and so then we get to really zoom in on what makes them flawed, right? Like they're one tragic flaw, right? And so we get to sort of experience the thing that makes them imperfect because everything else about them is perfect. So then, yeah, go ahead.
And at the same time, when you're looking at a superhero and you see them have a flaw, you see, oh, they're a real person. They're a person just like me. I could be a superhero. right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't tell Angela this, but I want to be Batman.
Oh no!
I don't know what you're talking about. I
You
am
know
a
what?
Batman
Making
fairy
enough money?
godmother because being a Batman and a fairy godmother at the same time
That's true.
is just better.
Yeah, you're with Batman fans here.
Okay,
You
good,
can totally
good.
be Batman. All you need is enough money.
I'm safe. I'm safe. Look at this guy. Huh?
Batman.
I'm safe.
Yeah.
Okay, good. I'm on
Now, see,
credit.
I have to admit, I'm fascinated with the concept of mutants. I grew up with X-Men, but I never wanted to be one.
Hmm.
And to me, I mean, like my Clear Angel Chronicles, it's about a young woman who's psychic, and I focus so much on how, I mean, imagining how that would be. I never thought that would be really cool. I thought, how crippling would that be? How overwhelming to constantly be bombarded by other people's thoughts and feelings, and how would you be able to connect or separate other people's thoughts and feelings from who you are? How would you ever know who you were when there's no clear boundary between? And so I explore all of those, the negativity, I guess, of being in that position, and rather than looking at her as a superhero or looking at her as this incredibly amazing person, which they kind of do. The people around her who realize that she's psychic, they're like, this person is amazing and we need her help. But she's the reluctant hero because every time she helps someone else, she hurts herself. And there's this balance of where does the importance of the self exceed the importance of helping society? And at what point does someone who is super have to say, you know what, my needs are more important than the collective?
Yeah, paranormal characters and stories can make it easier to write about societal problems because it sort of takes them out of reality and puts them somewhere safe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so you can do a lot more with the paranormal than you can with a straight fiction. At least I think so.
Yeah.
I agree.
Me too. Yeah.
So I wrote this question down like at the top of the hour, and we've brushed up against it a few times, but I want to go ahead and ask it because recently we've been talking about how the paranormal allows us to examine ourselves and examine real life, but I wonder what role the paranormal can play in escaping real life, which I think is maybe its more immediate or its more primary goal. But I wonder what you guys think about that. Like, how do we use it to escape?
You read it.
Well,
Right.
but it's more. I'll when I'm in times of stress, I love detective series. I love true crime and things like that. But when I'm in times of stress, I go to fiction. I go to fantasy. And part of, or I shouldn't say fiction, but like urban fantasy and paranormal. And part of the reason that I go to that, and I know some people go to romance, is because it's predictable. I know that things are going to suck. Things are going to be hard. Then they're going to overcome. And it kind of gives me a moment to escape, experience somebody else's pain and misery, and then watch them overcome without it being so personally connected to what I'm going through.
It's like when I used to watch Jerry Springer, like not to watch them overcome, just to watch them wallow in their own pain and misery, so that I could escape my own, right?
There you go. But I think
agree
that
with you, Heidi, though.
part of overcoming is also important, because if the story always ended badly, would people choose to escape there? And that's why when things are going great, I love watching true crime detective stories. But when things are hard, I don't want something that's going to make me go, oh, my life sucks. Theirs was worse. Mine could get worse. Oh, maybe I should just give up.
Yeah.
And across all of urban fantasy, paranormal, even when things are bad, they still end on a high note. There's something that the character ends up coming out the other side better for, even if their situation is bad, and they grow from it, and that gives you the chance to say, okay, I can do this too. I can be okay.
Yeah, it's like you want to go and see the vampire hunter stake the vampire, you know, and good versus evil and good wins. I mean, there's more to it than that, but that's essentially it. Something better happens in the end of it.
Yeah.
I had a writing teacher once that said, you don't have to end, it doesn't have to be a happy ending, but you have to give your audience some hope that it's going to be better eventually, right? Like everything doesn't have to be rainbows and roses at the end, but there has to be hope. And I think I agree with that on some level.
It depends on what you're writing. But yeah, definitely for most fiction, that's true.
Yeah.
Detectives, we don't have to. We can be mean in our
no,
night.
horror, you don't have to do that either.
Exactly, horror too, yeah.
But back to what you were saying earlier, Heidi, about when you're stressed and you gravitate towards a specific genre. For me, when I'm going back to reread books, I'll pick them when I'm in an extreme emotional state, and I'll pick them based on am I feeling sad right now? Do I want to stay sad? Am I feeling like I want to languish in this emotion for a while? And then I'll pick a book that I know is going to keep me there. Or do I want to, become happy? Because then I'll pick a different book that brings me to that place of being happy. And yeah, I love books. They're the best. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a very important part of our makeup and who we are. If it's not books, then it's entertainment, it's films, which are stories in a visual medium. And we need that on many deeper levels of our psyche to remain balanced and function properly and treat ourselves when we do have problems or depression or anxiety, going through a rough time, then we can self-medicate with books and stories then, can't we, like you were saying. So that's how I see it too. Yeah.
I mean, we mentioned earlier the old campfire tradition, right, of just telling oral stories. I mean, storytelling is in our human DNA. It's a way of examining the human condition and sort of it's an exercise in problem solving when we don't actually have to live the problem, So I think that there's value. All of our entertainment is based on storytelling, even music, and art. Like, it's all about story. So yeah, I mean, there's incredible value to living and witnessing story.
There's actually they've done psychological studies that show that when you read a story or when you hear a story, your brain is actually mirroring the patterns that the person who experienced that had when they were experiencing it. So as you read, you're gaining. It's not just ideas. There's a physiological, electrical thing happening where you're gaining the experience that the person who lived that story had. And this is true of, paranormal stuff as well as the straight literary memoir biography style stuff.
Well, there was a study that was done, I think about 10 years ago, that looked at children who were big readers or who were read to across a wide variety of genres were more compassionate, were more sympathetic, were more understanding, and were more likely to be inclusive of those with differences than children who didn't read across multiple genres. Even if they were big readers, but they only read in one specific genre, they didn't get that same benefit. I thought that was very interesting, and because of that, I've gone out of my way to make sure that my children read across multiple genres.
Yeah.
Good.
Including paranormal.
Obviously.
The genre thing is really interesting to me because if you think about, if you think about any characteristic that would make one genre a genre, paranormal, whatever, there are paranormal elements in everything from serious like literary fiction, all the way to just escapist, fun, pop culture fiction. Like,
Right.
and it's the same for romance. It's the same for everything. And I mean, the genre is something like. This is a whole different panel, Aurelia. Can we squeeze one in?
I know.
Because, like, this idea, I mean, genre is just, in a lot of ways, when you get past fiction, nonfiction, poetry, drama, genre is just a way to market. Because everything has elements of everything, I think.
Mm.
Yeah.
Sorry, I can get fired up about that.
No, I struggled for years, like with the Clear Angel Chronicles. I didn't consider it paranormal. Well, partly because I didn't know what paranormal was, because I didn't pay attention to marketing. I thought it was a psychic detective series, but that's not a marketable genre because that doesn't exist apparently. And
I
so
think it might now on Amazon.
no, go on Goodreads and try and find psychic detectives. Now there's
Because I know
psychic
a lot of people
detectives.
who
There's a
write
lot of
psychic
books about it, but they
Yeah.
get put under either, depending on their elements, they either get put under paranormal thriller, or they get put under paranormal detectives. Now, paranormal detectives exist, but not psychic detectives. That's too specific. So, but yeah, when the first book came out, they didn't have paranormal detectives as a genre, and so I ended up going with, I don't even remember now. Anyway, I had to change that last book that came out because they had paranormal detectives now. But I didn't consider it paranormal. It wasn't until several of my reviewers started referring to it as paranormal romance. Somebody else called it detective thriller with paranormal elements. And it's funny because watching how people read the story tells me more about those people than it actually does about the story. And how they choose to classify it tells me more about the people than it does about the story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, I like mishing everything together.
Well, that's
my
life, right?
contemporary romances are almost thrillers because
They don't-
they're inspired by the Grimm's fairy tales, and I don't know, I have like magic and were creatures in my fantasies, as well as in my urban paranormal stuff. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Well, I got a fairy tale noir mashup in one of my books, so
Yeah. It makes it more interesting when you have layers.
yeah. Yeah, I don't know how to classify half of my books because they're all weird formats. Because I've got one fantasy book that's interconnected short stories,
Mhm.
and the fairy tale book is short stories, but it's noir detective as well. And so I just stick it under whichever one will sell and leave it at that.
I mean, earlier when in the heroine hero
Mhm.
panel, we were talking about this desire to have it both ways, to have binary oppositions, yes and no, but then also to have it both ways, right? And I think like that the idea of genre is clearly like a publishing industry thing, and like you were talking about whatever sells. But honestly, if art imitates life, life doesn't fit into genres. Life,
Exactly.
like
I
it's
just made
life.
a comment on my booth about that, like right before I sent out the link for this. Yeah.
Yeah,
Real life doesn't fit in a box.
Yeah, I was having a conversation earlier today about YA and classification and how it's used for marketing. About the fantasy book Uprooted. Like I'd earlier this month I was in a book discussion about it, and a couple of readers didn't think it was YA, and they thought that the classification was just purely marketing. Because so I mean it's all very subjective.
Yeah. Well, I know in the publishing industry they try to keep it more delineated because it's easier to market. Because if you market a book that isn't YA to YA, then they get upset.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what happens. And I know I was really upset when my series, The Hunters, when I was shopping it around and then ended up deciding to self-publish. But several of them said, oh no, this should be YA, because the main character that the story is told from is a 17-year-old boy, and then there are other characters that are 18 to 24, but they're still in that YA age. And I was like, no, that's more new adult if anything, and I would not let a 14-year-old read this book. My children haven't read it, and I don't intend to let them read it for at least another 3 years because I don't want them to know their mother that way. But, and they're like, well, but YA is so popular right now. And I was like, I don't care about being popular. I care about being appropriate. If I were writing for a YA audience, I wouldn't have dropped the F-bomb about 15 different times in this book. And they're like, oh, well, maybe we should take that out. And I was like, no, that's part of the characters. They're not coming out. That's not how the story is. It's not geared towards kids. It's geared towards adults.
Yeah.
And age-specific marketing really bothers me because it implies that people from different ages can't get something valuable out of that particular book.
Yeah. I read a fantasy by my favorite author, and it's about a bunch of 8-year-old kids, and it was amazing and wonderful.
Right, and you got
something
out of it.
I was like, these sound like 8-year-old kids, and they're acting like 8-year-old kids, and they happen to be stuck with problems that fantasy heroes have to deal with. This is awesome.
I mean, look, the movie Super 8 by J.J. Abrams, like, that's about a bunch of kids, and I love that movie.
Yeah. That's one of the things that Pixar and Disney do very well, is they make their movies entertaining not just to children, but to adults and everyone in between as well.
Yeah.
And
I think part of the reason that the whole concept of middle grade and YA and new adults came about is sort of an effort for the publishing industry to self-monitor, like the Motion Picture Association, because there were books that were being marketed to children that were not appropriate for children. And it's kind of like Deadpool all over again. Just because it's a comic book doesn't mean it's for kids. My husband and I loved Deadpool. We knew better than to take our children to that. And people that are like, I can't believe this movie was so inappropriate. I'm like, hello, did you not know that they rated it R for a reason? That reason is it's not for children. That's why, right there.
Yes, anybody who took children to Deadpool's an idiot.
They deserved what they got. Well, okay, let me rephrase that. Anybody who took children to Deadpool and then got upset about it.
Oh, yeah.
I have several friends that, they're like, my kids are mature enough to handle this. I know who Deadpool is. He's funny as all get out. I'm taking my kid to see it. And the kid absolutely loved it.
There,
Do what?
That was a nice bit of self-editing.
Yeah, I try. I have my moments.
He's funny.
I write for adults, but I talk for everybody.
I know that's right.
But yeah, so it's just a matter of trying to create a way for parents to not have to be everywhere. And for me, I think it's ineffective because what one person considers okay for a child isn't the same as what another person considers okay. And it really is the parent's job to make sure that their children are viewing material that's appropriate. And just because it's rated PG-13 doesn't mean it's okay for your kids.
Yeah.
And you know your child better than anybody else. And so the whole YA, mid-grade, and new adult is just the same process, but lazier.
I feel like this stopped being about paranormal about 15 minutes ago. We started talking about genre, and I'm sorry.
That's okay. No, it's been an interesting conversation, but I agree with you, and I think the stories that I read, I could pick whatever I wanted to read, and my parents would let me, and if it was something I couldn't handle, I would put the book down. And there's a excellent book that had a very graphic, violent scene in it that I read when I was, I think, 12 or 13 or something, and I closed the book and I put it down, and I haven't gone back to reread it yet.
You're better than I am. I couldn't.
That's the one book. Like it was too much at that moment.
I had a book
and
like
I
that too.
haven't wanted to go back to it yet.
Yeah. I reread it though, but I just skipped the chapter with the graphic scene every time I reread it.
That would make sense. I mean, this is a book that I know is good because the first half of it was good. And it is paranormal. It's based off of the Seven Swans fairy tale, and she, the daughter, is making all of the shirts for all of her brothers who are turning into swans at night or during the day or whichever it is. And she's, in order to do this and have the magic work, she has to be silent for like a year and 7 days or something. And this violent scene happens like, I don't know, maybe 3 days before she's allowed to break her vow of silence. And so all of this stuff is happening and she can't say anything to the people who are being abusive towards her because she wants to save her brothers.
Mhm.
So I know the book is good. I want to reread it, but I haven't been ready yet.
Mm.
I guess
Well,
an
that's-
hour just flew by, right?
Yeah, it did.
It is that time.
Thank you all for coming, and thank you, Shane, for coming up with questions. I
Sorry.
feel like I'm turning into a zombie, which is appropriate because the panel tomorrow morning is zombies.
Is that the last one?
No,
No.
there's 4 tomorrow. There's
We have 4
zombies.
tomorrow.
There's science and science fiction. There's epic fantasy, and there's one more. Detectives.
Yep.
Yeah.
Cool.
Mm.
Aurelia, I'm going to send you a message.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Have a good night.